The night Sin Lee watched 41 seconds of footage that rewrote the architecture of everything he thought he understood. He did not make a sound. He sat alone in the conference room, 7 empty chairs around the long table, the dark wood paneling absorbing the silence the way it absorbed everything in this room, completely, without judgment, without record. The abstract painting from Seoul was on the wall opposite him. He had owned it for 8 years and had never once looked at it for longer than a passing glance. Tonight he looked at it like a man who needs something in his field of vision that is not the image on the phone screen he is about to watch again. He pressed play. The camera angle was what it always was, wide, slightly elevated, capturing the interior of the black Mercedes from the front. Timestamp 21:31. The street outside the windscreen was quiet, residential, 2 neighborhoods from anywhere either of them was known. She had chosen the location. He understood this immediately, the way he understood operational decisions, by reading the evidence of thought behind them. She had considered the geography before she arrived. She had made a decision about being seen. He watched her park. He watched the passenger door open. He watched Marcus Adami get in. He watched the door close. He watched Naomi turn to the man beside her, and he watched her face in the rearview mirror do something he had only seen it do a handful of times in 18 months, the face she wore when she was not performing anything for anyone, the face that existed before the awareness of being seen. Raw, unmanaged, the face of a woman who has been telling herself something for months and has arrived at the moment where the telling stops. The camera had no feelings about what it witnessed, it simply recorded. He watched for 16 minutes. He did not watch closely for the first 8. Then he watched with the specific, terrible attention of a man who has understood what he is looking at and cannot look away, not from appetite for pain, not from the self-punishing impulse of lesser men, but because he was a man who had always believed that the most important thing about any piece of information was what it actually said, not what you wished it said. And what this said was being delivered with the impartiality of a lens that did not love anyone in the car. He pressed pause at the 23rd second. He sat with the paused image for a long time, long enough that the room's ambient sound, the building's ventilation, the distant city became the loudest thing he had heard all week. Then he pressed play again and watched to the end. The end was Naomi alone in the car, Marcus gone, the passenger door closed, and Naomi sitting in the driver's seat in the dark of the quiet street with her hands in her lap, not on the wheel. Her expression in the rearview mirror was not guilt, and was not relief, and was not the satisfaction of someone who has done what they intended. It was the expression of a woman who has done something she cannot explain, which he recognized as the most specific and honest expression available to a human face, the expression that occurs when a person has arrived somewhere they did not fully plan for and are now required to be there. He watched that expression for 8 seconds before she started the car. Then the footage ended. He set the phone on the table. He looked at the wall. He poured a glass of water from the jug on the table. He did not drink it. He thought about Naomi. He thought about the night he found her, not found her. That was the wrong word, a possessive word, the kind of word that belonged to a version of him he was trying to be honest about. He thought about the night he saw her scan the room. He thought about the bar. He thought about the 4 days before she called him and the 18 months after, and he thought about all the things he had given her that he had not given anyone in the preceding decade, not because he was required to, but because for the first time in 20 years, the wanting of someone specific was louder than the habit of wanting generally. He sat in the specific silence of a man who has just watched 41 seconds of footage that have reorganized the shape of the next portion of his life, and he let the silence be what it was, complete and without management, because there was no one left in the room to manage it for. He picked up his secured phone. He made 2 calls, the first to the man who ran his information network, the second to a lawyer he used for matters requiring discretion. He gave them a name. He asked for a complete file by morning. He looked at the painting from Seoul for a very long time. Then he went home. If this story already has its hand around your attention and will not let go, subscribe right now, because we write stories here that find the places inside you that most stories never reach, and this one is only just beginning. 3 weeks before the conference room and the footage and the 41 seconds that changed everything, Naomi had stood in Sin Lee's kitchen at a dinner party she had not chosen to host and had watched herself perform. This was the part she had not named yet, the slow, polite erasure. It had not happened violently. Nothing in Sin Lee's world happened violently in the visible, obvious way. That was the point of the world he had built, the point of the dark wood paneling and the measured sentences and the composed faces. The violence, when it existed, was structural. It was in the way the room rearranged itself when he walked in. It was in the way his associates looked at her. Not unkindly, she needed to be fair about this, not unkindly at all, but with the specific, assessing attention of men who were determining what category she occupied and what the rules of that category were. She had been performing since the guests arrived. Not lying, not pretending to be something she was not, something more insidious than that she had been editing, selecting. Bringing forward the parts of herself that fit the room and leaving the rest at the door, and doing it so fluently, so automatically, that she had not noticed herself doing it until she was in the kitchen alone for 4 minutes refilling a wine bottle that did not need refilling, and she had looked at her own reflection in the dark kitchen window and had seen a woman she recognized and did not entirely know. She had been doing this for 8 months. She had not had a name for it until she was standing in the kitchen with the wine bottle and her own reflection, and the name that arrived was not dramatic and was not a crisis. It was just accurate, the way honest names always were. She was disappearing. Slowly, in increments, in the careful choices of a woman who had decided to absorb the complexity of a world she had walked into with open eyes, she had been disappearing into the performance of a woman who could handle it. She had gone back out to the dinner party. She had been warm and precise, and had said one thing that made the table laugh and had felt Sin Lee look at her from his end, with the specific pride of a man whose world has just been graced by the person he brought into it, and she had smiled back at him with the smile that was real, because it was real, and had understood for the first time that the real and the erased could exist in the same body simultaneously, and that this was the most frightening thing she had learned about love. She had called Marcus the following morning. She had told herself it was a closing conversation. Marcus Adami had grown up in Lagos watching men who were underestimated, beginning with his father, a man whose warmth was so complete, whose laughter was so genuine and freely given, that people made the consistent and expensive error of concluding warmth and laughter were the whole picture. His father had died a wealthy man in a house containing more secrets than furniture, and he had left Marcus 2 things, the warmth which was real and the understanding of what warmth was for, which was something considerably more architectural. Marcus had entered Dele Okonkwo's organization 4 years ago as a connector, a peripheral figure, the kind of man that larger men used without studying, because peripheral figures were, by definition, not the threat. He had spent 4 years being warm and available and laughing the way people laugh when they have never had to manage their laughing, freely, without calculation, and in those 4 years he had moved carefully through the organization's geography. Who trusted whom? Who owed what to whom? Where loyalty was genuine and where it was rented. He had come into Naomi's life 3 years ago at a gallery opening, and what he felt for her was real. He needed this understood, because the story he was building required her to understand it. He had loved her the way his father loved his mother, completely. With the full force of a man who understood that love and strategy were not opposites, that a man could feel a thing genuinely and still understand its uses, that the heart and the mind could run in the same direction without either being less sincere. When Naomi chose Sin Lee, Marcus had taken the loss without drama and had continued his work. He had filed it in the category of things that were not finished, because Marcus did not believe in finished. He believed in timing. The coup took 11 months of preparation and 4 hours of execution. Dele Okonkwo's driver found his employer on a Tuesday morning in a condition that closed the case quickly and without public attention. By Wednesday afternoon the organization had a new head. By Thursday morning every man in the structure had been personally visited by Marcus or by men who spoke for Marcus, and the message in each visit was the same. Nothing changes, everyone is valued, loyalty receives its proper return, and disloyalty finds the same. By Friday, the territory that Sin Lee had been watching for 8 months of careful, patient moves was no longer being directed by a peripheral figure and a set of middlemen. It was being directed by a man who had spent 4 years learning exactly where Sin Lee's operation was soft, who among Sin Lee's people could be reached, and what it would take to reach them. Sin Lee's intelligence network sent him the report on Friday evening. He read it at his desk and did not move for a long time. He read it twice. He checked 3 source confirmations, which was 2 more than he normally required, because what the report was telling him was that a man he had classified as a monitoring-level concern had, in the span of 1 week, become the most credible threat he had faced in 8 years. The man had been in his car. The man had been in his building. The man had been inside the 18 months of his personal life without his knowledge. And the man was coming. Naomi found the gun on a Thursday. She was in the underground parking garage of her building, engine still running, hand in the glove compartment reaching for a parking card, when her fingers found the weight of it, matte black cold, settled between the car manual and a forgotten receipt with the deliberate placement of something that was meant to be found. She sat with the discovery for 3 seconds before she saw the note beneath it, folded once, her name in handwriting she recognized from birthday cards and grocery lists, and one note left on a pillow that she had kept for 2 years before she made herself throw it away. "Welcome back, Queen, I'll be in touch." She had not spoken to Marcus Adami in 11 days. She sat in the car for 4 minutes without moving. Then she closed the glove compartment with the careful, deliberate click of a woman who understands that the next decision she makes will determine the shape of the next several months of her life. She turned off the engine. She went upstairs. She did not tell Sin Lee. This was the first mistake, and she knew it was a mistake the moment she made it, which did not stop her from making it. She told herself she needed to understand what she was holding before she handed it to anyone else. She told herself this with the fluency of a woman who had become skilled, over the preceding months, at building small convincing structures of justification around decisions her gut had already made. The gun meant Marcus had been in Sin Lee's car. The gun meant Marcus knew she was driving it. The gun meant Marcus had access to a building with a security system that Sin Lee had paid considerable money to make impenetrable, and had left something inside it anyway. The way you leave a calling card on a man's doorstep, not because you need him to know you were there, but because you want him to understand that the locked door was never the obstacle you were being given credit for. She lay in the dark that night beside Sin Lee and thought about what kind of man leaves a gun for a woman to find. The kind who wants her frightened, or the kind who wants her armed. With Marcus, she was no longer certain which was worse. She lasted 4 days with the secret before it lasted without her. She was in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning, coffee going cold beside her, when Sin Lee came in from a call carrying the particular quality of stillness that preceded the kind of sentence that reorganized the room. He stood in the doorway and looked at her, and his face was different from anything she had seen in 18 months, something living below the composure rather than inside it, the face a man makes when the world has just become a size he did not expect. "Marcus took over Okonkwo's operation," he said. The coffee cup was between her palms. She did not put it down. She looked at him and held the cup and let the silence go 1 beat longer than it should have, which was 1 beat too long, and she watched Sin Lee see it. "You knew something," he said. It was not a question. With Sin Lee, most things were not questions by the time he said them out loud. She put the coffee down. She walked to the bedroom and opened the drawer of the nightstand and removed the gun she had put there 4 days ago, wrapped in cloth, and she brought it back to the kitchen and placed it on the counter between them, then placed the note beside it. She watched him read the note. She watched him pick up the gun with a gloved ease that told her this was not the first gun he had handled in a kitchen, and she thought about how the ordinary and the extraordinary had been living in the same space for 18 months, and she had chosen, repeatedly, to see only the ordinary. 4 days, he said. Yes. Why? She had prepared answers for this. None of them survived the specific quality of his attention, the way he asked questions with his whole face rather than just his voice. The way being looked at by him had always felt like being read by someone who had already finished the book and was only confirming what they knew. "Because I needed to understand what it was before I gave it to you," she said. "And because I was afraid that if I told you, you would make a decision about Marcus that couldn't be undone, and I didn't know yet whether that decision was mine to give you." "It was always mine to give me," he said quietly, not harshly, with the precision of a man identifying a fact. "I know that now," she said. He looked at her for a long time. "He's been in the building," Sin Lee said. "Yes, which means someone let him in." She watched the calculation happen behind his eyes, the rapid, terrible arithmetic of a man assessing his own organization for breach, and she understood in that moment with a completeness that had not been available to her before that there were costs to what she had done that went beyond her, and Sin Lee and a Thursday night in a parked car. She had been the gap in a wall. She had not intended it and had not known it, and none of that changed the shape of the gap. He was already walking to his phone. She understood, she let him go. The following 72 hours moved with the compressed, accelerating quality of time, when the ordinary surface of things has been removed, and what lies beneath is running at a different speed entirely. Sin Lee ran his internal audit with the cold efficiency of a man who had been waiting, somewhere in the architecture of his preparation, for a version of this day. 2 men in his operation were identified by morning, not traitors. He was precise about the word, but men who had been reached, who had received something and given something in return without understanding the full picture of what they were participating in. He dealt with this with the surgical, non-negotiable clarity that had always been the specific and documented cost of disloyalty in rooms with dark wood paneling, and when it was done, the organization had fewer members and considerably more understanding of what the new situation required. Marcus, meanwhile, moved. He did not move clumsily. This was the thing Sin Lee had underestimated and was now recalibrating around. Marcus Adami did not move clumsily. He moved the way his father had moved, warmth in the front and architecture in the back, and the architecture was 4 years deep and precisely constructed. It went to supply lines. It went to 3 of Sin Lee's business relationships in the legitimate economy, men who received visits from Marcus's people, and were told, with courtesy and without specific threat, that the landscape had changed and that it was worth understanding who was holding what ground before making commitments to either side. By Thursday, Sin Lee had confirmed through 3 independent sources that Marcus had told at least 2 people that Naomi was coming back to him. Not that he intended to ask her, that she was coming back. Sin Lee heard this and sat at his desk and said nothing for a long time. And the man who had brought him the information stood very still, because he had been in Sin Lee's service for 6 years and had learned that the quieter Sin Lee became the more carefully a room needed to be navigated. "Get out," Sin Lee said, not unkindly. The man got out. Naomi had been raised by a woman who taught her 2 things about danger. Name it clearly, because unnamed danger is the most dangerous kind, and do not let anyone else's certainty about your future become the only version of it available to you. She was namming things now. She was in the study on Friday evening, a book open in her lap that she was not reading, when Sin Lee came in and stood in the doorway with the unguarded expression he had learned to show her, the one that lived below the composure and the authority, and she could see that something had happened and that it was worse than the previous something, which had already been bad enough. He told her what Marcus had said, without management, without the shaped version, the full version, because that was what they had agreed to be now. She sat with it. "He's not asking," she said. "Knows. He thinks I belong to him. He has decided," Sin Lee said carefully, "that claiming you is part of what he has won." The anger that moved through her was not the hot visible kind. It was the cold structural kind, the anger that reorganizes the architecture of everything it touches. She had been in Sin Lee's world for 18 months and had learned some of its language, and the language she was hearing from Marcus was one she had fought her whole adult life against. The language of possession, the language that turned a woman into a trophy for a man's shelf and called it love and meant it. "I need to be clear about something," she said. Sin Lee waited. "Whatever happens next, I am not a piece of territory. I am not a flag being planted. Whatever this becomes between you and Marcus, that is not what I am in it." "I know that," he said. "I need you to know it in every room," she said. "Not just this one. Every decision, every conversation, every move you make, I need to not be the object of this. I'm a person inside it. I'm aware of the difference and I need you to stay aware of it." He looked at her with the full, undivided attention that had been one of the first things she noticed about him, the quality of being looked at by someone who was actually present. "Yes," he said. One word, she held it. It was enough. Then she said, "Now tell me everything you know about what he has built, all of it, not the version you think I can handle, the version that is true." He told her everything. It took 2 hours. She did not interrupt except to ask the specific, precise questions of a woman who had been in his world for 18 months and had been listening the whole time, absorbing more of its operational language than he had realized, asking questions that landed with the accuracy of someone who had been quietly doing her own accounting and was now checking her figures against his. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. He planned this before the takeover, she said. Coming for me, he decided before he moved on Okonkwo. The timing is deliberate, a week after the coup exactly. He had already decided I was part of what came next. Sin Lee looked at her, which means the Thursday night in the car was not separate from this. Not for him, whether he arranged it or simply used it after the fact. My night in that car gave him something, a reason to believe the door was still open. She said the next word with a flatness that told him she was aware of exactly how it tasted. I gave him leverage, I didn't know I was doing it. That doesn't change that I did it. Naomi, I'm not punishing myself, she said sharply. I'm naming it. There is a difference, and I need you to let me name it clearly, because if I can't see it clearly, I cannot help you. He stopped. She looked at him, and the thing that moved through her face was not guilt, and not grief exactly, but something between them. The expression of a woman arriving at a complete and honest picture of a situation, and finding it exactly as bad as she suspected, and deciding that honesty was still, despite everything, the only useful tool she had. He's going to come here, she said. Yes. And he's going to come as though the answer is already decided, because that's what he believes. He's built the last 4 years around a version of reality in which he wins, and in that version I am the prize at the end of the architecture. Yes, Sin Lee said. Then we need to be ready, she said. Something shifted in his face. Not quite surprise, Sin Lee did not surprise easily, but the expression of a man encountering something he had understood theoretically, and was now encountering in its full, specific reality. He said. She said. I came through your door, I am in this world. I am not going to sit in this apartment while you handle the consequences of a decision I participated in making and call that protection. That is not protection. That is another kind of erasure, and we have had enough of those between us. The lamp burned between them. The city ran its indifferent course below the window. Sin Lee looked at the woman across from him and felt, beneath the layers of a week that had compressed more crisis into it than most years contained, the specific extraordinary experience of being genuinely not alone. He had been many things in his life, capable and controlled and feared and respected, and in his own precise way, loved. But alone was what he had always been underneath it all, alone inside his own intelligence with the world managed at careful distance. She was the first person who had ever looked at his world and said we, and meant it as an equal. All right, he said. Marcus came on a Saturday. He came in the middle of the afternoon, which was the choice of a man who had decided that darkness was for people with something to hide, and he had nothing to hide. He had called ahead, not to Sin Lee, to Naomi, on a number he should not have had, from a phone that left no traceable signal, a capability that told Sin Lee more about what 4 years of organizational learning had produced than any file his network had assembled. Naomi looked at the number for 2 rings before she answered. Marcus, she said. Naomi, his voice was exactly the same, warm, easy, I'm outside. She looked at Sin Lee, who was standing at the kitchen counter with the specific, still quality of a man who has positioned himself in a room with operational awareness of every entry point, and is not displaying any of this. She said, come up. She ended the call. She looked at Sin Lee. He looked at her. Something passed between them that was not words, the specific communication of 2 people who have agreed on something larger than the moment, and are now inside the moment and are trusting each other with it. Marcus Adami, when he came through the door, was exactly who he had always been. This was the most frightening thing about him. He was a tall man, dark and broad in the particular way of a man who had played sport seriously into his late 20s, and had kept the frame without keeping the schedule. He wore a cream linen shirt, open at the collar, and dark trousers, and he moved into the penthouse with the ease of someone who has decided the room belongs to them. Which was not arrogance exactly. Arrogance was a performance, and Marcus was not performing. He genuinely believed it. He looked around the space with the methodical, proprietary attention of a man taking inventory of what he has arrived to claim, and he smiled when he saw Naomi, a smile so warm and complete that she felt for a moment the specific vertigo of a woman standing inside a thing she used to feel and no longer trusts. He did not look at Sin Lee with hostility. He looked at him with something considerably worse, the calm, measuring assessment of a man looking at what has been occupying his property and deciding how to proceed. Sin Lee, he said. Marcus, Sin Lee said, and the two names in that exchange were a conversation entire. I came to talk to Naomi, Marcus said. I'm here, Naomi said. Talk. He turned to her, the smile again, warm, real, the smile her mother would have liked before she knew what it was for. Everything's changed, he said, as though this were a beginning. What I have now, what I've built, it changes the conversation, Naomi. You know that. Does it? She said. You were always the piece that was missing, he said. I built everything else, I just needed you in the right position. He paused, as though considering how much of the architecture to show. What you have here, I can give you more. I can give you everything this gave you and the one thing this never could. And what is that? She said. Freedom, he said. Real freedom, not the kind where someone's car has a camera. The room compressed around that sentence. The dashcam, he knew about the dashcam. He had known when he parked on that quiet street, when Naomi climbed in, when the small red indicator sent its alert 14 floors above the city. He had known and had factored it into his construction. He had used it. He had used her. Naomi stood very still. You knew, she said. I knew he'd see it, Marcus said simply. And I knew you'd have to tell him, and I knew it would break something between you. He spread his hands with the gesture of a man who has nothing to hide because he has chosen the hiding in advance. You needed an ending, Naomi. I gave you one. She looked at him. She looked at this man she had known for 4 years, had been warm with, had laughed with, had thought she understood, and she saw for the first time with complete clarity the whole picture. Not the warmth which was real, the architecture behind it. He had used her, specifically, deliberately, timed to his operational need, and he had done it with feeling, which was worse than doing it without, because it meant the warmth was a tool he wielded knowing it was a tool, and feeling it genuinely at the same time. You set it up, she said. I positioned it, he said, which was a different thing and he knew it. You positioned me, she said. I gave you a reason to come back, he said. You were never going to leave him on your own, I could see that, so I gave you something that would make the decision for you. The room went very quiet. Sin Lee had not moved from the kitchen counter. He had watched this with the complete external stillness of a man doing enormous internal work, holding the line clearly between Naomi as a person inside this situation and Naomi as territory at its center. He had watched Marcus come through his door and speak to Naomi as though she were a resource to be repositioned, and had understood, in a way he had not fully understood before, what she had been telling him in the study. She had seen this coming before he had. She's not going with you, Sin Lee said. Marcus turned to him, not quickly, the measured turn of a man who has already accounted for the obstacle. I didn't ask you, he said. No, Sin Lee said, you asked her and she hasn't answered. Both men looked at Naomi. She stood between them in the afternoon light of the penthouse, in the conversation of a man who had used her love as a surveilling instrument, and she was not afraid. She had expected to be afraid. She found something else, something with the same temperature as fear, but organized differently, moving toward rather than away, the feeling of a woman who has been named and positioned and managed and maneuvered, and has finally arrived at the place where she is going to name herself. You used me, she said to Marcus. You felt something real for me and used it at the same time, and you thought those two things cancelled each other out. They don't. Her voice was steady, not the performed steady of someone managing themselves, but the natural steady of a woman who has located the truth and is standing on it. You built a coup. You planned it beautifully. And you put me in it without my knowledge, without my consent, and you have come here to collect me like a flag you're planting in ground you've taken. And you call that love. Marcus's expression did something it had not done since he entered the room. It shifted. Beneath the warmth and the architecture, there was a man who had not fully prepared for the version of her standing in front of him. Naomi, he said. I want you to leave, she said. The air compressed. You don't mean that, he said, and the warmth in his voice had an edge inside it now, the faintest edge, like a hand turning a doorknob that has just discovered it is locked. I have meant very few things in my life as completely as I mean that, she said. Marcus looked at her. The look lasted several seconds, and in those seconds something travelled through it. The genuine feeling, she believed it was genuine. She had always believed the feeling was genuine, and the calculation beneath it, and the long recalibration of a man who has encountered the specific outcome he did not model. He looked at Sin Lee. Sin Lee looked back with the patient, total attention of a man who has positioned himself and his organization for a situation that may go several ways from this moment, and has prepared for all of them. "This isn't over," Marcus said. "No," Sin Lee agreed, "it isn't." Marcus looked at Naomi one final time. She held his gaze with the fullness of a woman who has nothing to perform and is done performing it. He left. The door closed behind him with a softness that was more controlled than any slam could have been. Subscribe now, because what comes next is what the whole story has been building toward, and we do not leave our audience without the ending they came for. The weeks that followed were the hardest and the most honest of anything they had built between them. Marcus did not disappear. Men like Marcus did not disappear after one conversation. They recalibrated, they redirected, they found new angles of approach. The territorial moves continued with a patience that told Sin Lee the man he had filed under monitoring had been building something that would not be unwound by a single afternoon in a penthouse. There were nights when Sin Lee came to bed late from calls and from the costly work of maintaining ground under pressure, and Naomi was awake when he arrived, reading in the lamplight, and they moved around each other in the dark with the new language they were still learning, the language of two people who have decided to remain. She was not a prop in the war. She held to this with both hands. Sin Lee held to it because she had asked him to and because, and this was the part that had cost him most to admit, her read on Marcus was more complete than anything his intelligence network had produced. She had sat across from Marcus in gallery openings and had dinner with him on ordinary evenings and had received the version of him that was not managing a professional presentation. The private version, the real version. And the real version had tells she could name with a specificity worth more than any surveillance file. She told him, he listened. He incorporated it, restructured 2 operational decisions based on what she told him, and when the restructured decisions proved correct he told her so. This was new territory for both of them. It was not comfortable. Comfort was not the point. On a Wednesday evening Sin Lee found her in the study, book open and unread in her lap, and he came in and stood and looked at her with the unguarded expression he had spent months learning to show her, and she put the book down. He sat across from her and told her about himself with the complete, stripped honesty of a man who had decided this was all he had left to offer that had genuine value. He told her about the 11 years before her, about the women who had moved through his world with the specific, transactional brevity of people who came through a door he had built for a purpose. He told her he had used the nature of his life as a permission structure for the nature of his behavior, and that meeting her had not changed what he was, but had changed what he wanted. "I have no clean hands," he said. "I have never had clean hands. What I have is the 18 months I gave you and the truth of why I gave them." She looked at him across the study in the lamp light. "The party," she said, "the night we met." "Yes. You know what kind of women come to those parties," she said, not accusatorially, factually. "I was not different from any of them when you found me. I came through the same door." "You were different," he said. "In the moment or in hindsight." He was quiet. "Because that matters," she said. "It matters whether you saw something specific to me that first night, or whether you saw what you always looked for, and then I became different because you decided I was. Because if it's the second one, if you built the world and then expected the woman you found in it to behave like she came from somewhere else," she held his gaze. "That's not fair, Sin Lee, and I think you know it isn't." The room held that sentence. "That," he said after a long time, "is the most accurate thing anyone has ever said to me about my own life. And I don't know what to do with it," he said, which from Sin Lee was equivalent to devastation. He was not a man who admitted the limits of his knowledge. He navigated by certainty. And here he was saying he could not see. "Neither do I," she said. They sat with that together for a while. The lamp made its warm island. Outside, the city continued its relentless commerce with time. After a while Naomi said, "What I did was wrong. I'm not repositioning it as something else because the context is complicated. It was wrong and I own it fully." "Yes," he said. "And what I need to know," she said, "is whether you can sit with a woman who made that mistake and came from the world you built and is still, despite all of that, and because of all of that, the most honest relationship you have ever been in. He looked at her. The unguarded expression was there, the one that lived beneath the composure and the authority, the one she had learned to find. Yes, he said. Then sit, she said. He crossed the room. He sat beside her on the window seat and looked out at the city beside her. She did not move away. The silence that settled between them was not the silence of distance, but of two people who have said everything and are choosing to remain in the same space afterward. After a long while she said, "The dashcam is still in the car." "Yes. I'm not going to ask you to remove it." He looked at her. "But I'm going to know it's there," she said, "and I want you to know that I know." "That's fair," he said. "Most things about us aren't," she said. "No," he agreed, "they're not." On a Friday night 3 weeks after Marcus's visit, Naomi was driving Sin Lee's car. She had not avoided it. She had considered avoiding it and had decided against avoidance because avoidance was the management strategy, and she was done with management. She drove through Lagos in the late evening, the city burning in its 10,000 commitments around her, and she thought about the woman who had driven this same car on a Thursday evening before the gun, before the note, before the full architecture of the thing she had been inside without knowing. She stopped at a light. Her eyes moved without intention to the dashboard, to the small lens above the rearview mirror. The red indicator was dark tonight. Sin Lee was not on the application, but the record was running anyway because it always ran, because the camera did not require his attention to do its work. She looked at the lens for a long moment. Then she looked back at the road. She drove through the city with the particular attention of a woman who knows exactly where she is, and has decided that knowing where she is, precisely and without flinching, is the only navigation that has ever been worth a damn. She arrived home, she parked, she took the keys. She went upstairs. Sin Lee was in the kitchen in a grey shirt, making the coffee he always made when he heard her come in, his back to the room, and she came through the door and he turned and looked at her with the face she had come to know better than any face she had ever known, composed, present, warm in the genuine way, and underneath all of it, visible only to her, the thing that had no name in his vocabulary and was there anyway. She sat at the kitchen counter and accepted the coffee. "The dashcam was on," she said. "It's always on," he said. "I know," she said. "I just wanted you to know that I know." He looked at her. She looked back at him. The kitchen was warm. The city ran its commerce with the night outside the window. Everything was unresolved and complicated, and real in the specific honest way that things are real when they are not pretending to be anything other than what they are. "Marcus made contact with 2 more of my people this week," Sin Lee said. "I know," she said. "Tund told me." He registered this. She had been told by one of his people, not by him, which meant she had a relationship with his organization independent of his management of what she knew. He had not arranged this. She had built it quietly over 18 months of paying attention. "Tund should have told me first," he said. "Tund told you second," she said. "That's still being told." The thing happened on his face that always happened when she landed something he could not redirect, the brief suspension, the almost humor, the specific expression of a man who has been genuinely got by someone he respects. "What else does Tund tell you?" he said. "Enough," she said, "enough to stay useful." He put down his coffee. He looked at her across the counter with the full weight of his attention, all of it undivided. "This is not the life I planned for you," he said. "You didn't plan my life," she said not unkindly. "You planned the door, I walked through it." "Yes, and I'm still walking," she said. "That's the part you need to understand. I'm not staying, I'm choosing, every morning. That is a different thing and I need you to feel the difference because I feel it and it matters to me that we are not confused about it." Sin Lee stood on the other side of the counter and received this. A man who had spent his adult life managing his world, met by someone who would not be managed and would not be erased and would not be a flag in anyone's ground. He crossed to her side of the counter. He stood beside her and they both looked out at the city, the complicated, burning, unresolved city asking of both of them what it asked of everyone who tried to live honestly inside it, not to be clean, not to be certain, not to be finished, but to keep choosing despite the mess, to keep namming things clearly despite the cost, to stay in the room with the full picture on. "Marcus is going to move again," Sin Lee said. "I know," she said. It's going to get worse before it's resolved. I know that too, she said. Are you afraid? He asked. She thought about this with the honesty she brought to all hard questions. Yes, she said, but not of the right things. I'm not afraid of Marcus. I'm afraid of what I almost let him turn me into without knowing it was happening. She paused. I'm afraid of the next thing I don't see coming. I'm afraid of the gap I don't know I'm in yet. Sin Lee was quiet for a moment. So am I, he said. She turned and looked at him. This man, with his dark eyes and his composed face and his tattooed forearms, and the painting from Seoul that he had stared at like a man looking for something to hold on to on the night, he watched 41 seconds of footage that reorganized everything. This man who had built a world and put a door in it and found her on the other side, and had never once, not once in 18 months, been fully certain he deserved what he had found. She had not known she loved him until this moment, which was strange because she had known it for months. But there was a difference between knowing a thing and knowing it with your whole body, and the difference was the look on his face right now, the face of a man who was afraid and had said so, which was the bravest thing she had ever seen him do. Then we pay attention, she said. Yes, he said. Together, she said. Yes, he said. She thought later, lying awake in the dark with the city burning its endless signal outside the window, about doors. Marcus had used a door she had left open without knowing it was open. Sin Lee had built the door she walked through. Her mother had tried to show her doors that were really traps and doors that were really exits, and she had listened well, and it had still not been enough because no amount of preparation was enough for the specific thing that happened when a person you had genuine feeling for was using that feeling as an instrument, doing it with warmth, doing it with care, doing it so completely that the tool and the feeling were the same thing. She was not going to be done with Marcus. She understood this. He was going to come again, differently, with new angles and new architecture, because that was what he was and had always been. The warmth was real and the architecture was real, and both were going to keep arriving at her door. She was not going to be done with Sin Lee's world. She was in it. She had been in it from the moment she scanned a room for exits, and he caught her doing it. She had chosen it with open eyes, and the eyes were still open, and what they saw was not simple, and was not clean, and was not the life her mother had described or the life she had imagined before the gallery opening 3 years ago. What it was hers. She had come through the door. She had stayed in the room. She had looked at the whole picture, dashcam and gun and coup and confession and all of it, and had remained the person she was, complicated and clear-eyed and choosing. And that was not nothing. That was, she was beginning to believe, almost everything. Sin Lee was asleep beside her. He slept like a man who has completed his accounting for the day and assigned the remaining problems to morning, and she found this maddening and familiar and entirely true to who he was. She thought about the dashcam. She thought about the small red indicator above the rearview mirror, running its record, doing its work, indifferent to what it captured, storing everything it saw with the patient impartiality of a thing that has never been asked to judge, only to witness. She thought that this was not the worst metaphor for what she was trying to do, not judge, witness, clearly. Herself and him and the world, they were both inside. She thought about Marcus in his new position, recalibrating around the answer he had not modelled. She thought about the 4 years he had spent building toward a version of reality in which she was the prize at the end of the architecture. She thought about the warmth that was genuine and the love she believed was genuine and the tool he had made of both. And she thought that the saddest thing in the room when he turned and left was not her anger and not his recalculation, but the moment just before he went when she had seen, briefly, the face underneath the architecture. The actual Marcus, the man her mother would have liked, the man who had held her hand at the gallery and had meant it. The man who was so convinced that winning was love that he had never once understood the difference. She could not save him from that. She could not save anyone from the architecture they built around their own feeling. She had learned this about Sin Lee in increments over 18 months, and was learning it about Marcus now in one concentrated terrible download, and the lesson was the same. Love was not sufficient and never had been, that feeling a thing genuinely did not protect the person you felt it for, that care without honesty was a room with no exits and warmth without transparency was just another kind of dark. She closed her eyes in the specific darkness of a room she had chosen to be in, beside a man she had chosen to remain beside, inside a world that was not clean and never would be. And she thought that in the morning she would wake up and it would all still be there, every unresolved piece of it, and she would look at it and name it clearly and choose again. Outside, the city burned in its 10,000 lights, each one a choice someone was still making, most of them complicated, all of them continuing. In the underground garage below the building, the dashcam on the Mercedes was still running. It had recorded the empty car for hours. It would record it until morning. It witnessed nothing and missed nothing and made no judgments about anything it saw. It just kept watching. Some things, she thought as sleep finally arrived, were most truthful when they stayed open. If this story is still living inside you and will not let go, subscribe now. We write stories here that find the places most stories never reach, and the next one is already waiting.